Hi, everybody. Shannon Petrovich with Therapist Talks. So I'm still a little new at this technology. I hope everybody found their way here. It has sort of the classic live streaming versus the new one. And anyway, welcome. And I will keep doing what I'm doing in case people do find their way here. And I hope that works. Now I'm getting a notice from the other thing. Oh, goodness. All right, so we'll just keep cruising. All right, thanks everybody. I guess people are chiming in. That's good news. Technology is not my forte, but anyway, this will be fun and we'll just see what happens. We'll explore together. As most of you know, I've been a therapist for over 30 years, and this thing on YouTube I started exactly a year ago. And actually today, when this goes, when this becomes a video, it will be my 100th video, which is kind of exciting. So it's my first live stream, my 100th video, and my 1-year anniversary. And I created Therapist Talks to share information, insights, and strategies to all those people who maybe can't access therapy and really have a need. There's so much mental health struggle in the world today, and it was just breaking my heart seeing so many people struggle and not have access. So this is kind of the new way to share things, and this is what I've been up to. So I know there have been a lot of questions that have been thrown out there on my comment section for the Q&A video, and I wanted to start with some of those, and then obviously if you have a question, please chime in on the right hand side or on the chat side, the comments. So Patricia wrote in that she's had back-to-back relationships with 2 different narcissists. The second one really throwing me for a huge loop. He was incredibly evil during the discard phase, and I was emotionally devastated. Since the most recent relationship ended, I've been incredibly afraid to trust anyone. I stay home alone with my dogs and cats, and I'm noticing perhaps I'm becoming a little depressed. Any recommendations on how to move on after such trauma? You know, this is such a common theme, and so many people are asking this this question or similar questions. The thing about it is when you create a relationship with someone who has narcissistic tendencies or manipulative tendencies, they attach themselves to every single thing that you do. They want your attention. They need your attention constantly. They need you to constantly feed their ego because it's so fragile and easily deflated. So you're literally, all of your attention and time and energy is focused on them. You're watching their moods, you're watching their attitudes, you're noticing what they need every minute. So when you separate, when you're discarded or when you separate, there's this trauma bond that we talked about in a couple of my videos. And so when you get free, there's really a lot of empty space that used to get filled up with that person. And it's really difficult to separate yourself emotionally and start to rebuild your life. So you have to think about it that way for starters, which is crucial, just to recognize, wow, what happened to me really hijacked my whole life, my whole being. All of my time and energy was hijacked for however long it was, whether it's 6 months or 6 years or 60 years. It's very devastating. And when that loss happens, you can feel this incredible emptiness. You don't know how you feel. You don't know what you want because you've been so focused on what that other person feels and what that other person wants. So it's really important to have time to yourself. I think it's extremely important to get out in nature, have some journaling time, have some downtime, take yourself on a retreat for a few days, whatever you can handle financially and with all the responsibilities in your life. So it's really important to recognize, don't shame yourself about this, but learn to rebuild. Notice what you feel, notice what you want, notice what you need. This is a very self-centered time. You need to be self-centered. And so you want to really focus on that yourself. You also, instead of learning to trust others, This is a time to learn how to trust yourself. So when you think about trusting others, we're thinking about throwing our trust into somebody else. And that's never what you want to learn to do. In other words, I need to learn how to trust my own creepometer. I did a video on this, and probably some of you have seen it, but how to develop a really trustworthy creepometer. So when you meet somebody, you're not trusting them because you don't know them, and you won't know them for quite a while, but you trust yourself. So when you are with a person and they are caring and giving and sharing, and it's wonderful and you're kind of harmonious, that's great. But then if they say or do something that's really awful, you need to be really quick to say, ooh, step back. So we want to keep our wise mind on board and also notice our emotions, but not let our emotions get carried away. So learning how to trust yourself is where it's at. And again, you need downtime, you need time to yourself, journaling time. So you really get to know who you are and what you're about, and you start to trust yourself again, not somebody else. Another question is, I've gone from my narcissist mother-in-law, so I've been separated from my narcissist mother-in-law and husband since May. I'm upset because I moved from my state to be with him and marry him. I've moved on, but certain thoughts about him choosing his mother angers me. I gave so much. I don't want to be bitter. I want to forgive. I've given so much. So this is a really important piece too, is how do you forgive yourself? And how do you forgive others but not let them get away with anything? In other words, you don't have to. Forgiveness is not about reconnecting with somebody and letting them have control over your life again. Forgiveness is really about learning how to find peace within what happened. So it's about, there's a saying, you can become better or you can become bitter. So if you learn something from the past, then you can become better. If you just stay angry and resentful about the past, then you become bitter. We don't want to do that. That's really toxic. When we think about bitterness inside or resentment inside ourselves, it's literally like drinking poison. The toxic chemistry, brain chemistry that happens inside ourselves just floods our system with that toxic chemistry. And it literally it destroys our immune system. It destroys our heart health, our cardiovascular health, pretty much everything. Makes you feel foggy and disconnected and all of that. So we don't want to drink that bitter poison for the rest of our lives. What we want to do is take stock. What happened? What was maybe something you could learn from it, something you could grow from that experience? And don't take yourself to task or take responsibility for things that were not you. If somebody is mean and nasty and does evil things to you, that's not your doing. And even if you trusted in them and were supportive of them and believed in them, those are good qualities. You don't want to shame and blame yourself for all your good qualities. So what you want to do is take a step back, take some time to yourself, recognize all your positive qualities, remind yourself that you have to strengthen and clarify your creepometer and get better at that so that you're not going to share those great qualities that you have with somebody who doesn't deserve it. You don't want to be trusting of somebody who's not trustworthy. You don't want to believe in someone that's not believable. So learning how to let go and move forward is really where it's at. Another woman named Denise says, I've gone no contact with my sister and minimal with my mother and brother. I find myself constantly hearing their criticisms of me in my head. I can't seem to shake it. So this is a really important part too. We tend to, we talk to ourselves inside our own heads about 40,000 times a day. I don't know who sat there and counted, but that's in the science, and that's what they say. And if you think about having somebody sitting on your shoulder saying really mean, nasty things to you 40,000 times a day, it would drive you nuts. So you've got to really take a breath and look at what are the messages that you're giving yourself. I would also ask you to step back a moment in time and ask yourself, where did those start? Because a lot of the times when we have connected with a Somebody with narcissistic tendencies, it has its roots in our way early childhood. So if you think about the kinds of messages you got when you were a little kid, and if those were critical and mean and sort of self-condemning, then you might have those voices internalized already. And then when somebody else kind of reinforces that, then it really is powerful. So we need to look at all the different voices in our head that are very self-critical. And we need to start to disconnect from those and let those go and look at the truth. Again, so we want to take stock. Who am I? What am I about? If I'm a kind, caring, compassionate person, I'm an empathic person, then those are the things that are who I really am. If somebody tells me I'm this or that, and I know that's not true about me, then I need to step back and realize that that's about them. It's not about me. So we always want to be careful about that. Self-talk can be very abusive, and how we continue that abuse on ourselves is super important. So again, take a step back and look at that. There's another person called Forward Looking. I love your handles anyway, it's funny. I'm stuck in the constantly learning everything there is to learn about covert narcissism. I do find it interesting as a subject of its own, but now I feel it's becoming detrimental to moving on. This is really important. Rehashing your personal situation over and over again may or may not be healthy. So you want to, you definitely want to learn about it. And that's why I'm sharing all these videos. It's because actually 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, probably 32, 34 years ago, one of my first jobs that actually inspired me to go to graduate school was in a domestic violence shelter. And I've just been, my heart has been broken for people in domestic violence situations for many, many, many years. So learning about it, I think, is important, because then you feel validated. You feel like you're not alone. You feel like all the crazy stuff that happened to you was not your doing, and it wasn't, you were not the only person that that's happened to. So it is important to learn about it and to validate your reality and to learn how to get out of it and move on. But you also want to balance that with rebuilding and renewing your life. So again, figuring out what you're interested in, what your wants and needs are, so that you can move forward. Let me take one from here. Can you suggest direct strategies, therapies to reset programming for the scapegoat? How do you find who you are and sustain it after a lifetime of this? So the scapegoat child of in a narcissistic family can be, that's a really tricky role, because typically you've sort of taken on the role of being the one that's always in trouble and the one that's kind of put down and not the favorite. And you know, people can swing from one to another. You can be golden child in some areas or some times of your life, and then swing into scapegoat child. But recovery means that you've got to look at who you are as a person. What I really like to help people understand and recognize is that you might have been really badly abused, and you might have been treated so meanly, and yet you grew up to be a really caring parent. Like, you worked really hard in your parenting, or you're a really good friend to people, and that wasn't something that you learned at home, because nobody was nice to anybody at home. So taking a look at those things that are actually you, and then separating that from the things that are not you. The things that are not you are all the things that the narcissist or other abusive person said to you that you know aren't true. So separating those things out, reinforcing the things that you know to be true, because that's what your friends say to you, and that's what other people who really know you and care about you think of you. So those are the miracles that are you. Those are the parts of you that survived all the abuse, and that's really crucial. I've not heard from him. Okay, that tells me I've been replaced. I'm okay with that. I'm working on other things. I'm working on forgiveness so I can be totally free. This is wonderful. I think it's really crucial that we see that future as freedom. And that's not to denigrate the amount of grief that you have to go through. And grief is an interesting thing. Like, a lot of people really don't want to allow themselves to feel their feelings. If they feel very sad about losing that person, then they feel ashamed for feeling sad because they don't want them back. They know that person has been toxic to them. But when you recognize that grieving, oftentimes we're grieving what we wish that relationship would have been, not what it actually was. It might have been so awful and toxic, and there might have been very few good times, but we still had fantasies about what we wanted it to be, and maybe lots of fantasies about what we wanted it to be, maybe lots of investment that we had made into it, and thoughts about the future. So you're grieving all of that. You're grieving not being with somebody right now. You're grieving what you imagined the relationship would be. So you've got to give yourself space to do that. Let's see if I can grab another one. Can you suggest direct strategies? Oh, I wanted to mention EMDR. One of our subscribers mentioned EMDR, and that is a really good strategy for getting over trauma. And I think that trauma is very real for many people. And so even though, YouTube videos and things like that can give you strategies to help you rebuild, for some people the trauma is very deep and very real. And so you need help with a therapy like EMDR. It's sometimes hard to find that, and it can be, a lot of EMDR therapists only do strictly self-pay. So I know it's not going to be accessible to everybody, but EMDR helps you process what's basically stuck in the small aspect of our brain. That's the reactive fight, flight, freeze mode. EMDR helps us take that material out, process it across our hemispheres of our brain, and then put it in our memory banks and call it a day. We can actually put things to rest and put things at peace and let go of them, and let go of the stories that are attached to them too. Because if we have very self-defeating and self-condemning stories attached to that, that can be really destructive over time. Yeah, so Linda's saying, after he was gone, the big space left behind put me physically off balance. So I think that, again, I talked a little bit about that already, that big space that's left, we really have to learn to fill it in. We have to learn to listen to ourselves again, how to learn to find out what our wants and needs, and even our emotions. A lot of people really have a difficulty even knowing what they feel. When you've just noticed and obsessed on and focused on somebody else's emotions constantly, you literally don't know how you feel anymore. I'm gonna go on to another one. I finally broke up with my narcissist after 3 years. We live in the same apartment building in different apartments, and now I see him and his new victim every time I turn around, in the gym, the lounge, or by the pool. I know what he is, and I never want him back. So why does it upset me to see them? I want to feel okay and disconnected. So again, this is part of the trauma bonding, is that you're so emotionally connected to that person that when they come around and you see their face, or you see their car, or you hear their voice, or anything like that, it's literally a rush to your central nervous system, because you've been so bonded through the constant manipulation and constant trauma. So it's very hard to get free, and it's really important not to shame yourself, to give yourself time. If there's any way of getting out and living somewhere else, that would be ideal. But otherwise, some of the things that are really important strategies that I want to mention are all of the other things that help us to calm down our central nervous system. So as I talked about, that rush, that fight, flight, or freeze happens in your central nervous system. The only way to combat that is to do training, self-care strategies that help you learn to calm yourself down. So you've basically kind of learned to put yourself on high alert and hypervigilance. And learning to calm yourself down means learning how to breathe deeply, learning how to do prayer, meditation, self-calming, mindfulness, all of these kinds of strategies. And it has to fit with who you are. Obviously, some people some of these things will resonate with, some you may have to do it differently. So it needs to go along with who you are and what you're about. But it's really important to teach yourself how to self-calm, because then when you get that rush, or even when you're going out somewhere that you might see that person, that you're able to breathe and calm yourself down so that you can feel okay, no matter if you run into them or if you run into something that reminds you of them, because that's going to happen. You're going to get triggered and you're going to get that fight, flight, or freeze response. But self-calming techniques are always going to be helpful and healthy. Things like music and calming music and just bathing yourself in that calming stuff is really important, because again, for a lot of people, they've literally been on high alert, hypervigilance, just on pins and needles, wondering when the next shoe was going to fall, tiptoeing around on eggshells, all of those things. That's part of that trauma bonding, and you're just so scared all the time, and that the rush of the adrenaline through your body builds up this cortisol in your brain. It's so toxic for us. It's just terrible. It literally destroys our immune systems and it destroys our cardiovascular health. So the more that you can start calming yourself down, incorporating time out in nature, incorporating calming techniques, really, really important. I've been working on self-development work. I spoke the truths of my feelings to my dad. That got me as the scapegoat. My brother is the golden child, flying monkey. It's hard to read these sometimes. That is so true. I got the silent treatment in the coldness from him quite often, and for no reason at all. It was very hurtful. And if he did talk to me, it was as if he hated me. Yeah, this is so painful. I've done a few videos recently, I think 3 or 4 recently, on growing up in a narcissistic family, growing up with a parent who's a narcissist. Narcissists are really poorly equipped to be parents, obviously. They have, by definition, they lack empathy, they lack care and concern for others. They are concerned about themselves. They are concerned about how things look and not necessarily how things feel. They're concerned about superficial things. And so growing up in a family like that just makes you feel inadequate and hurt a lot and unloved. And so the harmful part is that we internalize that feeling that I'm unlovable. So it's bad enough to feel like you're in a family where you don't feel loved. And the scapegoat child especially feels unloved. What we internalize that story when we say I'm unlovable, then you carry that story with you inside your own head, telling yourself that story over and over again throughout your life. And so that when you bring that story with you into your life, it just causes ongoing damage. And that's the stuff that we have to step back and take a look at and say, wait a minute, I'm not unlovable. Every child is lovable. Every child is just a precious child of God. And when that child is trained to believe that they're unlovable, it's tragic, absolutely tragic. And so we want to have compassion on ourselves for what it was like to grow up that way. The golden child is sort of the opposite, but also very hurtful, because typically the golden child will feel like they are lovable only when they are adoring of the narcissistic parent, only when they are adorable, and only when they are bringing accomplishments and sort of grandiosity to the narcissistic parent. So that in some ways is even more tricky and confusing for somebody, because they're struggling with that throughout their lives. they become human doings instead of human beings, and they struggle with perfectionism typically. So redoing that is, I was just a precious child. I didn't have to bring trophies and ribbons every time I showed up. I just needed to be present. And so learning how to just be is really important. Let's see if I can see some of these other ones. Talked about that. There were a few that talked about their concern for their children. And my children are under my narc husband's territory. He has the power of them financially. Are they going to be fine with this environment going forward? I'm concerned about their well-being. Another person said that he wanted to know how to inform his 13-year-old daughter about their parent gaslighting her. And a third one said, when and how, if ever, do you explain to your children that their father is a narcissist? This is very difficult, but I think what's really important to recognize, first of all, are they safe? If a child is unsafe, obviously you need to engage the authorities and make sure that you create safety for them, whatever that takes, even if it means calling the police and going through all of the court stuff, which is a nightmare, but obviously you need to create safety. If it's not an issue of safety, but just emotional damage, it's really hard and very, very difficult to co-parent with somebody like that. And I think it's really important to recognize the different developmental stages of each child. So a young child, they are going to have a hard time understanding anything that is going on. So when they express confusion, it's absolutely important for you to respond to that and help them to learn how to take care of themselves and learn how to not take things personally if their parent says something that's not kind or not helpful. Then you can teach self-care strategies, and you can teach them to help to sort out what's okay and what's not okay. An older child, like a teen or a late teen, again, you want to respond to their concerns. You don't want to jump in with your own judgments on their other parent, because that can put them squarely in the middle of the between you and your ex, and that's really unhealthy for them. So you want to only respond to what their questions, their needs, their wants, and their hurt feelings. So if they come to you with hurt feelings, then you want to listen to them and then respond to that and help them with boundaries and self-care. So the two big messages for kids are boundaries and self-care, and learning how to do that. And even those basics can be super helpful for kids and teenagers. When it comes to adult children, I think it's, again, you want to wait and see their needs. So when they come to you with a question or concern about their other parent, it's okay for you to respond, but you don't want to bring it up to them and basically unload your own stuff onto them. It's really important just to listen and to respond with boundaries and self-care strategies. Let's see. Manipulated and controlled all my life, married a controlling man, treats me as if I'm nothing. Gosh, this is a lot of why I do what I do. It's just so important for us to recognize that that when we've been trained to accept manipulation and control, we are set up. We're set up to hook up with people who will do that to us again. So we have to learn about this. Is really important. It's going to be helpful just to see what is manipulation. I did a whole series on one was on the love bombing and the just all the different manipulations, all the games narcissists play. Because when you haven't been a part of learning about that, then it just seems normal. If that's the kind of family you grew up in and people were constantly violating each other's boundaries and doing mean things to each other and manipulating each other and controlling each other, then it just seems normal. So you have to learn about it to make sure that you don't keep letting yourself be treated that way. let's see. As an only child of a scapegoat narcissist and scapegoat codependent, I've always cycled between golden child and scapegoat. It continues to happen as an adult. How can I find a better balance? So it's really about, again, sort of taking a step back and looking at who you are as a person, and growing some really good boundaries and really good self-awareness. So you want to determine what your goals are in life and start to pursue those in a very clean and clear way, and not let things derail you. The scapegoat, it means sort of you just don't believe that you are worthy, and you're not going to sort of pursue your dreams and pursue your life. The golden child is all about trying to be everything to everyone, and you don't want to be that either. So you just want to be you, and live the gifts that God gave you, and those might be completely different than what you grew up thinking that you were all about. So separate from the expectations of others and look at who you truly are. So yeah, a bunch of people have talked about cycling, and there's another one. There's another one here, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. The one of them was about cycling the Jekyll and Hyde and other cycling. Yeah, so how big a role does cycling play? Their days, they will have 2 days of good, normal, healthy behavior, and then either fly into a rage over nothing or wake up the next day and have horrid behavior for the next 3 days. I'd like to learn what triggers the cycling, whether it's a chemical imbalance, social input, or both. So I think that is a very common thing that people experience with borderline personality disorders as well as narcissists. And I think the reason is that they need to, as we know, they need to be constantly fed a supply of adoration and support and all of that. And they, when they don't get that, then they start to collapse. And the collapse usually either looks like implosion or explosion. And when they implode, they can be self-pitying and suicidal and, you know, making threats and emotional, or they can be exploding and raging and violent. So both are indicators of the same thing, that they can't sustain the internal structures, and so they just do this implosion or explosion. So those are the sort of the things that happen. It's possible to have a borderline or a narcissist who's also bipolar, and I think that's kind of what you're referring to in terms of the biological or the chemical imbalance is a bipolar illness. But that's not really all that common. I think it's that typically people with personality disorders haven't learned how to manage their own emotions. They expect others to manage them for them and to keep them on balance, and that's just not going to happen. You can't rely on other people to do that for you. So whereas all of us have ups and downs, the borderline or the narcissist are going to expect you to fix that for them. So the pressure turns on every time they have an up or a down, whereas you or I might just go and do something to help ourselves feel better. They're going to have an implosion or explosion to try to get you to make them feel better. Let's see. They can, like I said, you can't have a bipolar and a narcissist at the same time, because one is a chemical thing and one is a learned thing. Splitting or black and white thinking associated with NPD, then it made sense why I could be thrown away so easily despite the loyalty I showed my dad. Yeah, this is so sad. The black and white thinking is not about you. It's just another manipulative strategy. It's another the way they think, really, is somebody is all good or all bad. Somebody is all in, they're all in a relationship, or they're completely out. And it has nothing to do with what you've done or who you are, or your value as a person. So it's really important to separate how you've been treated with what you deserve and how you deserve to be treated. So your loyalty to your dad was all there, but his hot and cold, on and off, black and white thinking was probably very, very, very painful. I can forgive, though I maintain no contact. I'm glad you brought that up, because we can have no contact with somebody and forgive them. Again, forgiveness is for me. I don't want to drink the poison every day of the rest of my life. So I'm going to let go of my bitterness, and I'm going to forgive. And that's just the way we can choose to be a part of someone. And then if we don't want to, in terms of that forgiveness, if we want to maintain contact, sometimes we'll find that we can. If we've forgiven them, we can actually be a part of their lives in a really self-protective way. So I did a video called The Journalist Method of Dealing with Narcissists. And what that means is that when you're around that person, that you're just the facts, ma'am. Like you think about being a journalist in a war zone, and how they're just completely unflappable, and they're just doing their thing. And you can actually be around somebody that is toxic and difficult and hard, but you've emotionally separated yourself from it. You're watching them do their thing, and you're just thinking, not my circus, not my monkeys. So, they're doing their thing, they're manipulating, they're doing their control dance, but I'm not affected by it. And you can learn how to do that, and that's a really healthy thing to learn. Then you can choose whether to stay in relationship with a parent or an adult child or anybody else who has narcissistic traits. So that's something to really think about. How do you emotionally disconnect so that you're not being hurt by that person, but you can actually be around them or not be around them, but you get to choose. And that's the beauty of it, is that then you have the ability to choose. All right, let's see where we're at. So Sandra says, still, it's not clear to me. No one was born a narcissist, true. So is a narcissist a victim? Can they help being how they are? And can they actually change? So this is a really hot button issue. And I get lots of people getting really upset whenever we talk about this. Theoretically, a narcissist could change if they wanted to go to therapy for 5 years and work on it really hard. A personality disorder of any sort, the standard belief and practice and therapeutic truth is that it takes 5 years of really solid therapy with a therapist that's going to be unflappable and able to walk through that with them for a number of years. The problem is that a narcissist, by definition, doesn't think that anything is their fault or their problem. They, by definition, don't really care that much to change their behavior. And so do they change? Rarely. So before y'all get upset, just know that your person with narcissism probably never did change, and I get that, and most of them never will change, but theoretically it is possible, so I stand by that. Is it possible to remain detached as long as you are not in love and charmed by them? So in love is a really, one of the things I want to really throw out there is that you can still love this person. If you're a loving person, you don't stop loving somebody, but that doesn't mean that you have to be in relationship with them. So you can love them and leave them. And that's such an important thing to recognize. I think a lot of times we think, if I still love them, I have to be with them, and I have to put up with them, and I have to make this work. Yeah, no. You have to use your wise mind and decide, this is toxic for me. This is going to kill me emotionally, physically, the brain chemistry that it's causing me. This is just bad. And so I'm gonna leave this person, even though it's hard. And even though I still love that person. So really important to let go when it's time to let go and when that person is toxic to you. Let's see if I can get interested in that as well. So yeah, you can be separate. I had several periods of no contact. Oh, somebody else asked if do you have to be no contact forever? Not necessarily. You may decide to go no contact with a parent or with a sibling or somebody else, and then later you feel more emotionally intact and physically intact, and your life is kind of on track, and you don't feel triggered by them anymore. You might be able to be casual and be able to see them for family events or whatever. Even if you divorce somebody, hopefully you'll be able to take care of yourself to the degree that you would be able to coexist with them so that your kids would have that ability to be around both of you at some point. But this is not always possible, obviously. But yes, a lot of times emotionally you can set a boundary and go no contact, and then later you decide, well, I want to reconnect with my mother or my father or my sibling or whoever, and you can try to do that. Silent treatment, saw my emotions, identity, life, confidence. Talking about confidence and emotions and life identity going downhill. It's really, it's so true. And that's why we have to be very self-protective. When you're meeting somebody and you have questions about them, keep your wise mind on board. Don't let it become intimate too soon. Talk about this in one of the videos. The chemistry that gets released when you have sex with somebody is oxytocin, and it's the exact same chemistry that happens when you breastfeed a baby. That's how attached you're becoming to somebody that you have sex with. So if you don't know that person super well and you don't trust them and you don't really recognize what they're about and that this relationship is really going somewhere, it's really foolish to allow yourself to become intimate with them. Save yourself the heartache. Just wait and step back and really get to know them. And you don't really get to know who somebody is and what they're about until you see them under stress. And you can't see them under stress in a couple of dates, or if you never even met them and you just connect with them online. You don't know what they're about. You don't know their friends. You don't know what their reactions are to difficulties or challenges. You really want to know all that before you get intimately involved. So save yourself some of the heartache. Feel extreme attraction for my ex-narcissist, even seeing their pictures. So again, the trauma bonding kind of takes, it's a real thing. When you, over time, connect all of your emotions, all of your moods, all of your experiences to that one person over a lengthy period of time, it can be, it really hijacks you. It hijacks your emotions, your identity, and your confidence. So you want to make sure that you if you're feeling really that triggered by that person, it's probably really important to go no contact for a while. And then you'll be able to be more, keep your wise mind and be more rational when you are around them, or if you see them, or if you're triggered by them. 60 years of narcissistic abuse from my mother. I'm so sorry. Have gone no contact, but mother sending in flying monkeys. How do you deal with it? Well, you have to go no contact with the monkeys too. And so that can be really painful if they're part of your family, and typically they will be. The narcissist is always going to try to get a reaction, and if they can't get a reaction, then they'll eventually give up, or they'll ramp it up. And when they ramp it up, you just have to ramp up your boundaries. So your boundaries are how you protect yourself in a relationship, and being no contact with your mother is really painful. And then disconnecting from whoever she's sending in as the flying monkeys is really hard too. Again, you're going to grieve, and grieving has to do with who you wished your mother would have been to you and not who maybe she actually was. Recognize that the other relationships in your life may need to sustain you, and that those are the relationships that you create in your life are really about who you are, whereas your mother is just who gave birth to you. So if you need to separate and you need to go no contact, you also probably need to carve out those folks. No contact for 7 months, but if I see a picture of him, I just accept that's how it is for me. Yeah, I mean, what I like about what you're saying is that you're staying no contact, even though you're very attracted. The revolving door happens when you go, oh, I'm so attracted to him, I got to go back. And a lot of people get back in those sick, unhealthy relationships over and over and over again because they still feel love or they still feel attraction. Yeah, don't cave into that. Just let yourself live your life and separate from that person. I had to threaten no contact with my brother if he continued to triangulate for my dad. That got him back off quick. Told him dad can deal with me himself or not at all. Awesome. Triangulation is another really twisted, manipulative strategy that narcissists and other abusive people engage in. So you want to watch out for those triangles, and always tell people I'm only going to deal directly, and I'm not going to talk through you or listen through you. You know, dad can talk to me directly. You can talk to your brother directly and say, that's enough. We're not going to do triangles here. How can you process knowing there's a child being abused by a narc? Having grieved for them and thought I can set an example, and one day they may wake up and get the support to get away. If there's a child being abused, obviously you need to engage the authorities in whatever way you need to. That would be a time to talk to a police officer, sit with a victim witness advocate. Depends on where you are and what your possibilities are. Have an attorney, obviously, if you need to, but you don't want to allow that to go on. The emotional abuse is the harder part to prove, and so that's more difficult. But engage authorities in whatever way you need to, and if you feel that there is an emotional abuse, then you need to engage an attorney and get help with that. Yeah, the put downs and the jabs. You know, again, as I said before, it's really important to be there for the child and to allow them to share their hurts with you, and then to help them see that those that put downs, in the same way if your child was being bullied, you help them to see that whatever Johnny said on the playground, it's not about you, it's about Johnny, and helping your child to see that when somebody jabs and says mean things, that's that person being mean, and you don't, that has nothing to do with you. So helping them learn boundaries and learn self-care. And that's really, really challenging, but it's really possible. I mean, I've worked with kids for many years of all ages, and they are really good at seeing what's true and what's not, and cutting through things and finding their way. So I think it's really possible. You can even teach them self-care strategies. Way back, I was working with little kids, and there was a little 5-year-old that I was teaching how to calm down. He would have these fits that were just horrific. And I was also working with his parents in family therapy, and the mom told me one day, she goes, we were out fishing and we were starting to get mad at each other, and her little boy said, breathe, mommy, breathe. And so little kids can learn self-care strategies, and they can learn self-calming, and they can also learn that when someone says something mean to you, it's not about you, it's about them. So, you know, developmental stages, so recognizing how to speak to kids at different ages and that sort of thing. Let's see. I feel sad and ashamed. I kept talking to my ex even though there were so many put downs. They got worse and worse. Now I see exactly how he was using me. So when you see it all in retrospect, which is the only way we see it, we're not going to necessarily see it in the moment. Be really gentle with yourself. If you didn't see it before, it's only because you didn't see it before. And typically what I find in my clients is that they are empathic, loving, caring people who believe in others, and they believe when someone says they're sorry, and they believe when someone falls short, and they give them the benefit of the doubt. And those are nice qualities, again, and you don't want to beat yourself up for having positive qualities in your life. So be gentle with yourself. Even though you didn't see before, that doesn't mean that you're bad or wrong or stupid. And those are the things that we typically tell ourselves when we have stayed in a relationship for too long. So be gentle and don't beat yourself up. When you just thank yourself for seeing it when you saw it, and help yourself heal by being gentle with yourself instead of being harsh and judgmental. Let's see. You're welcome. My mother was MPD. I groveled for her attention and love and never got it. I gravitated to men like mom. Such a difficult thing to recognize till now, pushing 70. Well, there's no time like the present. And I know it's painful to see when you've had these patterns that have been really harmful in your life, and they've taken you down dusty roads. So I'm always sad to see that people have spent so much time in relationships that didn't feed them. But there's no time like the present to start again, and to have friendships and activities and maybe a relationship that really does feed you and nurture you. And remember, don't accept anything that isn't feeding and nurturing and nourishing of you. It's really, really crucial that you take good care of yourself, and that you surround yourself with others that care about you. You know, life is stressful. I had a professor in grad school who used to say this all the time. He said, pain is inevitable. Misery, however, is optional. And the pain and the stress of life is just all around us. We can't avoid that, but we don't have to beat ourselves on top of that. And so beating ourselves up is how we get miserable and not just in pain. So when we are struggling with these things, it's really important just to be gentle with ourselves, to be kind and caring. Under pressure from narcissistic fathers flying monkeys, to go to his deathbed at the nursing home, wondering what strategies I need to remain no contact as we wait for the onslaught. This is a tough one. And I think what's really important, Marianne, is that you decide what you want to do. And that means that you might decide to go to his deathbed, or you might decide not to, or you might decide to go when no one else is there. Whatever you decide, it's your journey and it's your relationship with your dad. I have a client who went to her dad's deathbed, and he was just as nasty as he could be. And I know others who have gone to the parents' deathbed, and that was healing for them. So you decide. I would definitely stay away from the others, but I wouldn't necessarily tell yourself you're only going to do this or you're only going to do that, because you might change your mind, and that's okay. It's your journey and it's your relationship. You might decide that you're going to go when he's completely not capable of responding to you, and you can go and say what you want to say, and leave it at that. I think that may be healing on some level. If that doesn't happen, it can be really healing to write a goodbye letter that you're not going to obviously share or send, but that can be healing for you. So that would be good. Borderline narcissistic cycling. I think I talked about that a little bit. Explain the difference between parent labeled parental avoidance and parent who must remove themselves due to verbal emotional abuse from a narc child. I'm not sure how to respond to that. I told my mom on her deathbed, I love you, and she just glared at me silently, but she must have loved me. She did a lot for me. Yeah, so, again, it's your decision. I initialed our divorce 7 months back after a 26-year marriage and covert narcissist. I counterclaim and said to my face, he ain't going anywhere, and he will prolong the matter. What are the chances he will? I think, that's something that's very specific, and you kind of have to talk to an attorney about that kind of thing. I want to, so Miss Lakeisha said, I'm going no contact with the narcs in my life. Do I keep them away permanently? This is a really good question too, and I think I started to touch on it, but you can do whatever you decide. You might find that you get stronger and that you are able to emotionally step back, and that may make you feel like you want to reconnect or want to have partial connection or want to go to family dinners or whatever. It's really up to you. So I think it's really important to allow yourself to have whatever reality you want to have. It's awful how sick they make you. It absolutely is. And I spoke to this a little bit, but there have been multiple studies about how the stress chemistry flowing through your body destroys your immune system, destroys your cardiovascular health, and it makes you emotionally sick. So it destroys the serotonin, which is what makes us depressed, gives us anxiety, depression, all kinds of things like that. The Jekyll and Hyde personality that is seen in the narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, and dark triad personality. Oh, yeah, Jekyll and Hyde is right. And so we've talked about this a little bit, but it really can be so tricky when you think you know somebody and then they turn into somebody else. This is why it's so important not to get into a relationship so quickly. When people jump into intimacy right off the bat, what you're doing is creating a situation where you're already attached physiologically and emotionally, and you don't even know that person well enough to know whether they've got a Jekyll and Hyde personality or not. So that's really, really important. Can they come to terms to negotiate? Do they understand relationship rules? Do they understand the meaning of universal values and generally accepted mannerisms? I would say generally yes. Yes, 100%, yes. And the thing is that they understand all that and they don't really care. So the thing is that we want sometimes to say, well, that person doesn't get it, or they're not capable of blah, blah, blah. No, not at all. Typically the reason that you get love bombed and that you get sucked in is that they are really good at generally accepted mannerisms and being charming and knowing that it's nice to do these polite things, but they're not going to keep doing it as soon as you're love bombed and you're hooked. So as you know, when a person knows that you're hooked or thinks that you're hooked and then they stop being nice, that tells you exactly what it's all about. But no, as people generally know what's up, and they know what relationship rules are, and they know what general values are. So see PTSD from being raised by two narcissistic parents. I'm so sorry. And being bullied at school without sticking up for myself to maintain their false persons. Traumatic. Trauma is such an important aspect of the healing. Healing from trauma is a huge, huge thing. So again, going back to EMDR, if you have access to that, it's really important. Having a therapist that will help you work through PTSD, super important. And chronic PTSD, obviously, complex PTSD. So those are all super important. Well, as we start to come to a close, I'm sorry for all the questions I didn't get to answer. I tried to get in as much as I could and tried to speak to everything that I possibly could see rolling by, but there was a lot. So I will throw out one last question, and if you would just give me a quick yes or no, was this helpful? And would you like me to do it again? And maybe I'll be able to find time to throw this out there every once in a while. So I appreciate all of you, and this we will post to my page. And again, it's my 100th video, so it gets to be my 100th video, my first live stream. And I'm so glad that everybody participated so well, and I'm so glad the technology worked. Kind of a surprise, and it's our 1 year anniversary at Therapist Talks too. So take care, everybody. Take really good care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.